The following podcast is for informational purposes only. The contents of this podcast do not constitute tax, legal, or investment advice. Take responsibility for your own decisions, consult with the proper professionals, and do your own research.
Blockchain systems can be coded so that, you configure the rules. And instead of like Google's motto, can't be evil, don't be evil, you can have blockchain systems that can't be evil. You program them and then founders throw away the keys and only the community can change the rules.
GRTiQ podcast.
We are like astronauts floating in the space of time.
Welcome to the GRTiQ podcast and the first episode of 2025. Today, I'm speaking with Justin Banon, founder of Boson Protocol. Boson Protocol is building decentralized commerce infrastructure that aims to replace traditional e-commerce intermediaries with minimally extractive protocols built on Web3. A physics graduate from Imperial College London, Justin has a unique business background and pedigree, including once transforming a $50 million company into a $1 billion digital platform before becoming fascinated with blockchain's potential to create fair economic systems. Justin provides a lot of unique insight and perspectives on how to scale business, and as you'll hear, through Boson and Fermion Protocols, Justin is working to pioneer hard tokenization, which is creating verifiable guarantees for physical asset transactions in the digital blockchain space. I started the conversation with Justin by talking about his background, growing up in London, and how his early fascination with science shaped his professional journey.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure. So where I'm from geographically is from London in England. Kind of parents, my mother was English. My father is from Mauritius, so a small island between Africa and India in sort of the middle of nowhere. What sparked my interest in science and technology? I was just one of those really geeky kids that would just like stare at the stars and think, wow, what is that out there? And just ask questions. You kind of get those kids and like about plants, about how does this work? What is light? Just from, I don't know, the age of 3.5, and it hasn't really changed much since.
How much of that sort of early curiosity you had as a young person shaped your life and sort of the things that you've pursued professionally and the topics and issues that have interested you?
Massively. Well, a couple of weeks ago, I gave a talk at DevCon with Professor Potts, this blockchain economist who's also a physicist. It talks about the evolution of order in the universe and how, blockchains enable this new computable economy, which is an evolution of order. And so for me, this kind of common thread, which to be honest, only recently have I been able to draw a common thread, but it's always been, how do things work? What's the nature of being, the universe? How have, these complex organisms formed? How did they start? Where is it heading? That just this evolution of order and complexity through the universe. And physics is kind of a base level for that. But then when you get to, blockchains and, for example, the thesis I have with Professor Potts on the computable economy is that blockchains are like going from RNA to DNA. They enable this, whereas RNA enables organisms like viruses, and DNA enables this, ecology of multicellular life that sits on top of it. In the same way, blockchains enable our traditional fuzzy economy to turn into what we call a computable economy, like a giant kind of computer that will support vastly more complex economic life forms. And so that whole thread is, how does complexity happen? Yeah.
Do you see, when you think about the emergence of blockchain, and you sort of brought it up there when you were talking about sort of the evolution of order, but do you see the emergence of this technology as sort of an evolution of tech? Is it a revolution against the sins of Web 2? Is it something about economy, privacy, data? I mean, how do you sort of frame the emergence of this thing?
Well, there's a number of lenses. I mean, one that got me into blockchain, I ended up heading up this kind of $1 billion global company, which I'd done a digital transformation of and grew to this $1 billion platform. And, kind of referred to myself as like the chief extractionary officer. Because increasingly my job became kind of extracting from customers, extracting from sort of buyers, from sellers, and even from staff that give them their kind of, best years of their life building this business. That was my job. Extract and send up to the owners. Part of what blockchains enable is a new economic system where we can resist this runaway extraction that we see in the world economy. In the world economy, I mean, in order for, I can't remember whether it's 50% or 80% of wealth to be with the top 1%, but in order for such a significant proportion of the world's wealth to be concentrated in 1%, it's not by chance. You need an extraction pump on a global scale to pump all of the money out of our pockets into theirs. So that it was my primary driver. But since then, I've sort of seen that blockchains, this is the thesis out with Professor Potts, that blockchains enable a new economic order, a fundamentally different type of economy that is a giant computer. And because it's more robust and reliable, it supports vastly more complex applications and will unlock exponential wealth.
We're going to return to a few of those themes as we continue this interview, but let's return to sort of your personal story here. So you decided at the age of university to pursue a degree at the Imperial College of London in physics. So take us back in time. How were you sort of thinking about career and what drew you to the field of physics?
I mean, like I said, I was a very geeky child. I was reading Einstein's sort of general and special relativity about the age of 6 or 7 and quantum mechanics. I mean, I was a difficult child to get to school because I was up all night reading all this stuff and blowing my bedroom up with sort of chemistry experiments and stuff. So I'd already written to Imperial College and worked out, I mean, at the time, they were the best physics degree possibly in the world. I mean, I'm sure they are still. Well, it was just, I had this craving to understand how the world worked. The basic operating system of the universe, just since I was pretty much, my earliest memories. So it was very much just the natural, I couldn't wait to get there type thing.
Is physics the best lens sort of to understand the nature of reality and what sort of that operating system of the world is? And I mean, certainly you sort of thought about it at the time. You still think that's right?
I think it's an essential lens, but not a complete one. There's been so much development in physics in the several decades since I stopped studying at university. Amazing developments. A lot of what I study now is kind of metaphysics, the things outside of the realm of, so philosophy of, why is there anything at all? Why is there something rather than nothing is quite a big question. The mind-body problem, heart problem, consciousness, the whole understanding of life, lots some new developments and theories coming out on that. There are many areas of very important learning and knowledge that sit outside of physics as well. So, yeah, that's the operating system that runs my brain. Yeah.
So if we go back and visit you in time as a university student, you strike me as somebody that's probably thinking about an academic path. Am I right about that? Or what were you sort of thinking about career at that time in your life?
Well, at the time I was running a couple of businesses in parallel. One of them was like a video production agency and one of them was like a model agency. I kind of had my girlfriend was a model agency booker and she started her own agency. So I started running all the systems and technology. We built a kind of electronic booking system and stuff. So, I mean, and that sort of business side of things kind of, in a way, displaced and replaced I kind of got to the stage with physics where all my burning questions have been answered. And then I caught a sort of a different bug. And one was being kind of mid-20s, running a little agency, going out lots of fun. And the other was building businesses and fun businesses as well. I mean, I've never really been interested in accountancy firms or anything like that. No offense to all the amazing accountants out. But yeah, I mean, I sort of then caught this new bug of like business.
Where did that come from? I mean, it seems like a leap, and maybe I'm naive to it, but it seems like a leap from physics to I want to be a startup and entrepreneur.
Well, I mean, the leap was thinking, I mean, economic systems are very valuable systems. And, if you can solve economic problems, it leads to significant personal benefits. And how do you solve an economic system? I mean, basically what you're trying to do with the business is create some sort of economic unit where the outputs exceed the inputs, right? I mean, of course, I just visualize it in terms of physics. And I thought, well, that's an interesting problem to solve. You can solve that problem. You could probably, be able to pay your bills and do all the things that you want to do in life. And to that, I caught that bug. And it was like this, okay, I'm sure, physicists have a certain degree of arrogance that they can solve every problem using, first principles thinking. By that time, I suffered from a lot of that physicist arrogance. Now, I don't think that you can solve, there's many problems outside of the realms of physics, which makes life more interesting. But at that time, and I thought, right, well, how can I go and apply what is the physics of business and things? And so I kind of got into running a few of these companies, and then started doing a master's in, at the time it was called like digital innovation, but basically it was this emerging science or emerging kind of theory of things like how to create digital platforms and studying these early digital platforms and how they sort of operated, scaled exponentially. And platforms are like feedback systems, really, network that are driven by network effects. You need to set up the right feedback loops in order to get runaway growth. And, I knew I'd wanted to do that. And so, and I sort of took a role in a reasonably, it's a small to medium business, a medium-sized business, about $50 million business at the time, whilst doing masters in the evening on digital innovation, because I wanted, a patient to practice on. And I, took this sort of priority pass as it was the company as part of a larger group. I ended up running quite a big chunk of the group. But basically they were selling lounge visits for airports via paper cards or plastic vouchers. And I thought, okay, what happens if you digitize this? So we started digitizing. So instead of having a paper card, plastic card or a paper voucher, you had a digital kind of, I'm trying not to use the word token because that wasn't used at the time, but a digital voucher for it. And so I kind of digitized, and initially that was not really that successful because no one was interested in digital vouchers until all the big banks suddenly realized that shutting branches and driving people to use online banking and mobile apps is vastly cheaper for them. But no one wanted to use a mobile app. People still wanted to go to banks and talk to people. So they realized that burying rewards inside mobile apps like free lounge visits when you travel would cause people to download the app, get the benefit, and once they download the app, they were hooked. And so that trend, it's strange how adoption trends happen. You've got all the right reasons for the technology. That trend saw that company grow from about 50 million to about $1 billion turnover. And I digitized everything, expanded beyond lounge visits. And you had these like digitized products and services that were plugging into MasterCard, Visa, American Express, JCB, China Union Pay, diners, everything. I had 90% or so market share of that that market. Yeah.
If there is a physics to business, and it sounds like you would make the argument that there is, and I certainly would adhere to that, what were sort of the lessons or laws of the physics of business you learned through this experience? And it sounds like it's going to be somewhat related to things like platform and network effects and things like this, but what's the insight?
Well, the insight is that there is a certain set of rules that you can apply with a platform where you position yourself between a buyer and a seller to coordinate transactions, but it gives you a unique market position, which not only can you abuse, but you have a fiduciary responsibility to abuse in order to extract maximum value from all participants and send the money up to the owners. And I got quite good at that, but it didn't sit morally with me. And I realized that what we were creating in this sort of physics of business were systems of extraction to pump value from people and communities to a sort of a shareholder elite. Around the time when I had my wife, had our daughter also, I just felt this strong urge that we all have a role in making the world a better place. And I had real issues with doing this. And so I did a second master's in crypto, and I'd started to get into, through the path of this emerging science of tokenization. Also, Protocols was heavily involved in loyalty. So, tokens and loyalty and points and all of that, they're all, and I sort of, at the moment I heard about tokens, I was like, wow, this is like an economic toolkit, right? And so that I just got hooked. I have mildly, maybe not mildly, but slightly obsessive personality in terms of when I get hooked on something like that. So for me, it was physics, then business, then kind of tokenized, and blockchains and stuff. And I just got absolutely hooked on that. And I can remember when I used to try and keep up with all of the articles on crypto that were being published on Medium. And there was a time when it was almost like you could sort of, and I imagine like there must have been a time back in the past where people tried to keep up with all the videos that were posted on YouTube or something, right? Very early. And so, yeah, I did a master's in crypto, and then I left my job heading up this $5 billion company about 3 months after my wife had our daughter. I mean, she thought I was completely insane for doing that, very highly irresponsible. I didn't blame her. I mean, and I had a concept, which was I had been at Priority Pass digitizing products and services into digital vouchers. I'd taken them. They were it's all about representation. They were representing products and services as paper vouchers. I did a digital transformation to represent them as digital vouchers. And I thought, what happens if you represent them as blockchain vouchers? It's not just to change your platform. And that's what so many people get wrong. Now, this explosion, everyone's interested in real world assets and all of it. But all they're doing is representing physical assets on a blockchain in exactly the same way that you could represent them on a centralized system, right? The key thing is, why use a blockchain? What different property would it have? And that is, it's like called the physical asset oracle problem, right? If I tokenize my car and you buy the token, how do you know you're going to get the car, right? If it's a digital voucher, and I'm a centralized company, you don't know you're going to get the car. I could default one. But if it's a blockchain, you should have strong commitments, or why use a blockchain at all? Okay, transparency, auditability, those aren't the core, those are fringe benefits. If I send a Bitcoin to your wallet, I can't then bounce that. It's not like bouncing a check or rescind it or, that was the core property. And at the time, it wasn't clear whether you could enable strong commitments on physical assets in a decentralized way without using an intermediary that might then, capture the market. So I was doing a bit of blockchain consulting for a company in Miami, and they'd flown me over business class. It's unusual. I mean, I get, flown something like that I wouldn't enjoy a couple of glasses of wine or something, but I had this bug, and I thought, okay, it's either possible or it's not to enable strong commitments on a physical asset without a trusted intermediary. And what I'm going to do is maybe I can't come up with a method, but let me see if and it's a kind of a physics thing, if I can kind of, disprove it, or, do an impossibility proof. Prove it's impossible, and then I won't have to worry about this anymore. I can just say, this is impossible, you can't do it. You always need centralized intermediaries to ensure you get the car. And I kind of failed on the impossibility proof and ended up sketching out the first version of the boson mechanism. And that's how it all started. Yeah.
And where did that name come from, boson?
Well, boson is a type of fundamental particle, and super geeky in physics, and it's a kind of carrier particle. And so, boson, the protocol links the physical and the digital. And then the actual logo for boson, I went onto a website that only particle physics use to do things called Feynman diagrams, which are like little squiggly diagrams of how subatomic particles interact, and just created the logo, and then gave it to the designer to just make it look nice and stay the same on the sense.
I want to go back a step to your introduction to crypto and blockchain. It's not always the case, but sometimes in interviews, the first spark of interest is on the speculative nature of this asset and kind of watching this price action. But in your case, it strikes me that there was something more fundamental here about the tech or about the thesis of the tech. Can you, in sort of a non-technical way for listeners that are interested, why would someone like yourself, who seems to be on a very successful career track and doing a lot of interesting things, what did they see in this tech that was sort of a light bulb moment?
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, there's two things. One is I'd become this chief extractionary officer, and I could see that that's, extracting from people is, maybe it's a stronger word, but it's a kind of like a type of evil, right? It's something that I oppose. So blockchains and crypto technology and the whole thesis of this alternative financial system and alternative economy enables you to do something that you cannot do with like centralized. The key innovation was that you could create systems that would operate as designed, and even the founders couldn't change them. Chris Dixon, a great article, Why Decentralization Matters, which says that all platforms start out wanting to share and collaborate and get lots of people on and be all cooperative. And they inevitably end up competing and extracting because they have an imperative to do so. And, blockchain systems can be coded so that, you configure the rules. And instead of like Google's motto, can't be evil, don't be evil, you can have blockchain systems that can't be evil. Program them, and then founders throw away the keys, and only the community can change the laws. So that was one. That was a value type, a solution to this, excessive extraction. But then the other part was, these are economic toolkits, right? So in this whole physics of business or physics of economics, these were systems that could be programmed like a circuit board, but economic, right? So it's almost like this programmability, it's almost like I'm talking about physics of business, it's almost like electronics for business. And that just, fascinated me. And I've been exposed to platform strategies, and this was all these kind of runaway network effects. And all of it is all like electronic circuits where you get feedback loops, and it's got the same underlying physics governing them. And so here we have these kind of programmable systems that you could program so they can't be evil, and they are building blocks of an entirely new type of system. Yeah.
Can you take a minute and just talk a little bit more about network effects, and you keep sort of double clicking on this concept of feedback loops as the mechanism that sort of drives that. Why is that true? And like, what is the different types of network effects that exist in the world?
Well, I mean, essentially what happens with platforms is that they will get network effects where, for example, if you've got a platform with no buyers, testing me a bit now on the thing, but let's see if I pass. I think you've got kind of cross-site network effects where without buyers, you don't get sellers. Without sellers, you don't get buyers. But then you've got sort of same-side network effects where, if you've got lots of buyers, the more buyers you've got, the more sticky it becomes for sellers, right? Because sellers go where the buyers are. And then the more sellers you've got, the more, okay, I might want to go to this other platform, but I always go back to Amazon because it's got all the sellers and it's got the range and variety. So those are a couple of examples. So these sort of network effects are things that kind of, if you can get the flywheel turning, will get increasing returns and that will compound until eventually you have this unassailable, people can't compete with you because and that creates customer lock-in. Yeah.
And then one more question before we move on to Boson Protocol. Extraction's an interesting thing because on the one hand, I tend to agree with you that excessive extraction is sort of one of the reasons why modernity is so problematic, and a lot of the things we see in the world today that I find disheartening are somewhat related to this idea of excessive extraction. However, it does seem that there is some level of extraction necessary to keep the lights on, to pay people a salary, and to sort of grow the business. And so how do you think about this balance between, if you accept the argument that there must be some level of extraction, and of course, this fact that excessive extraction is problematic?
Yeah, I mean, that's why the phrase is excessive extraction. We're all in business to make money. Few of us deny that there comes a point where companies act in an anti-competitive way. I mean, Amazon has been accused of anti-competitive practices, etc., again by the FTC, because they are using their privileged position to compete with sellers and to go and do it. No one denies that. Well, few people deny that is sort of anti-competitive. But if you're using your market dominance to be able to charge, ridiculously excessive prices, and there isn't, your market dominance means there isn't the competition necessary to bring those prices down. I mean, if you go to like Disneyland or Legoland, one of the things you'll find is you have the combination of incredibly high priced food, like $35 pasta, and the worst food you've ever had all in one, right? So I went to Disneyland Paris and €35 for a bowl of pasta, and it was almost inedible. Right now, if you went to a really nice restaurant and paid that and it was really nice, okay, you're in Paris, but that combination, right? That's what kind of like market, you get these market failures, and that's what we mean by excessive extraction. We don't mean, we mean instead of 1 or 2 trillionaires, maybe it's like many, many millionaires, many, many people operating e-commerce businesses making money, rather than all of that money accruing to Jeff and his crew. That's what we mean by, if we don't mean some sort of like techno communism where no one's making any money and it's all, no. We just mean fair markets with lots of people, the distribution amongst all of us, right? Let's make all of us millionaires instead of everybody, having a nice lifestyle rather than someone with 500 billion. Yeah.
All right. So let's then return back to Boson. So you've set a very nice foundation here for sort of how you were thinking about blockchain and some of the things you identified in this technology that was different from the things you were working on, and sort of the traditional or conventional approaches to economics and operating systems. Reset the table here for listeners that aren't familiar with Boson, what it is and sort of what the vision of what the team there is trying to accomplish.
Sure. I mean, there's a general thesis that what we're building is a new digital economy built out of Web3, where instead of having these kind of, lots of intermediaries all sitting between buyers and sellers, sitting on the middle of transactions and abusing that market power to take excessive profits, we have just what are called minimally extractive protocols. So very famous Chris Banisky, the VC from Placeholder VC, Chris Banisky article on protocols as minimally extractive ordinators. So instead of having platforms eating the world, you've just got layers. Like you've got SMTP for sending email. You've got TCP/IP for transferring data. And that you will just have these protocols, blockchain protocols doing and these are public permissionless protocols. And they just do a specific job, right? Whether that job is compute, indexing blockchains, data storage, whatever. They will do that and they will charge a minimally extracted fee. That goes back to our point of, whether it's okay to make money. A minimally extracted fee processing all of the physical commercial transactions on the planet is massive amounts of value, right? It is also returning massive amounts of value to all the people, the buyers and sellers. So that's the kind of thesis of a stack of applications in Web3 where you have these protocols, and each one has has got a purpose, and they all are composable and interoperate. And so central thesis of Boson is that you see eBay, Amazon, all of these other e-commerce like platform intermediaries doing that job of enabling two non-trusting entities, Alice and Bob. Alice and Bob don't trust each other, so they need Amazon in the middle in order to do business. And let's swap Amazon for a blockchain protocol that can't be evil, that does the same job, but is hard-coded not to screw anyone and not to start abusing its market power. So that, the core thesis and vision of Boson has always been Web3's decentralized commerce layer to replace the need for things like Amazon and eBay with a neutral piece of technology. So if I want to sell something to you, I can sell it to you and you don't need to trust me. I don't need to trust you. And there's a coordinator in the middle that takes a fee for doing that. That's the thesis for Boson.
So, Justin, I'm sure you've gathered this during the interview, and my longtime listeners know this already. I'm non-technical, so a lot of my questions are a little bit probably on the naive side, but I do want to ask this question. I hope it's a good one, of why something like Boson needs to exist when there seems to be an ocean of like L1s and L2s. And so help me understand, and maybe listeners with the same question of, if you're solving that specific problem you just stated there, why can't any other sort of L1 or a lot of these emerging L2s sort of handle that?
Well, if we wanted to swap an NFT or any other asset that is either originated on chain or can be transferred on chain, right? So, for example, debt, company equity is pretty much off chain at the moment, but it can be completely represented on chain. Then that's pretty trivial for a blockchain to handle, right? We can do an atomic swap where we can guarantee that, you could buy an NFT from me for 10 ETH, and there's no risk of default at all. We don't need anything sophisticated in the middle. But when there's a physical asset involved, it can't be fully represented on chain as what we call a physical residue. And then you get two problems, right? You get the physical asset oracle problem, which is, if I tokenize my car, you buy the token, how do you know you're going to get the car? Why? And that's one of the core problems Boson solves. And then the other one is the economics problem of the fair exchange problem. Why? How do two untrusting parties do commerce over the internet? That's the core problem that we solve. And, give you a quick overview of how we do it. A seller will list an item on Boson. A buyer will see the item. They like what they see. They will put their funds into Boson. Boson will lock up the funds. And then if the buyer doesn't raise a dispute to say, I haven't received the item or it's not to the necessary quality, then the seller will get paid. So, that's a very simplistic description of what Boson does. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. So help us think then about something that comes up on the podcast quite a bit, which is this total available market and where we are in the evolution of the Web3 industry. and sort of the activity you're seeing there. So this is, if I'm kind of getting the vision right here, this is on the consumer facing side where you're connecting buyers and sellers. And so this isn't DeFi, this isn't trading tokens. What are you seeing about the market and the growth of people that want to sort of use this type of technology in place of more traditional e-commerce type solutions?
Well, the thing is, it happens in waves, and we are just wading into a huge upswell again. I mean, the last big peak we had was the whole, around about, a couple of years ago, we had the whole kind of metaverse peak, and, everything was, we had, huge number of brands, people like Tommy Hilfiger, lots of these other brands, all wanting to do that. And there was two reasons. One, the technology was cool, and these brands have seen waves of technology decimate their competitors, right? So like people who didn't catch on to e-commerce are not around much anymore, right? People that didn't catch on to mobile are not, and social. There's been these mass extinction events in markets like retail, fashion. So they are, they're very keen to not get extinguished. That's one thing in terms of the technology. But the other is, Web3 and crypto, when we have these big bull runs and, big bull markets, suddenly you get this whole demographic of young, crypto-rich consumers that want to spend their crypto. And what can you spend crypto on? Okay, we can trade tokens, that's buying more crypto. Play with DeFi, that's kind of buying more crypto. We can buy NFTs. Okay, so those are like digital things. But what do people spend their money on? Is it those three things? Not generally, it's physical things, generally, right? And so here's a way for brands to directly access crypto, the money in crypto wallets, and do that exchange without having to go through this fiat system and stuff. That's really attractive until it's not. And then you get the bear market. And that's what, you get the bear market, and suddenly crypto, instead of being cool, is like, it's seen as a kind of scam, fraud, illegal, all of these other things had a terrible reputation, and there's no money in crypto. So the appetite for brands goes. But now with this new kind of, with Trump getting in, and I'm not going to make any comments in political comments, but purely from a crypto angle, crypto is suddenly now, instead of being Elizabeth Warren and Gary Gensler's view on crypto prevailing, right? It's now, let's make crypto the core of the US. And the US leads the world in terms of this is now a massive technology that countries are wanting to embrace. And that affects the view of everyone worldwide, including all the brands. It's making it legitimate, because if the US says this is an illegitimate technology, you're fighting a losing battle. But now it's going to be, legitimized. So that's the one thing, which means it's legitimate again, and it's becoming cool again. So that's one. That's not enough. The second driver is look at the prices, right? We are going on this huge upsurge of pricing of crypto prices, and happens to coincide with with lots of certainly luxury and fashion markets, for example, who are kind of early adopters of these technologies, suffering reductions in their sales. So I think LVMH posted a 7% negative growth last month. And so what they're doing, they're looking for new markets, right? And so suddenly it's like this kind of this resurgence of this cool technology with, once again, an entirely new demographic of people that are going to have wallets full of value. And what is Boson? Boson is a way of connecting crypto wallets to physical things and enabling commerce, in this Web3 native way.
If there's a listener out there that wants to learn more about Boson, kind of get involved, potentially become a buyer or a seller in this environment, talk to us about sort of how that process looks and what's happening now.
Well, I mean, they can go to the Boson Protocol.io website and click through to the app. And if they're a small seller, where they can set up their own kind of Web3 store. but there's also kind of widgets and stuff. And so if the larger sellers, they could just contact the Boson team and they will just be handheld through either creating their own store or plugging in widgets into their own site. We've got a kind of global deal with WooCommerce, which is like the biggest e-commerce platform system, if you like, so which just completely plug and play. What we've been doing during the bear market is just building the product that I wish we would have had during the last bull. That's why this bull market is going to be a lot of fun, because unlike last time where we were kind of like, we were operating on basically a prototype, this time we are kind of like enterprise grade solution.
Amazing. And I'll put links in the show notes for any listeners that want to sort of get activated and get started. With the view that you have of the things that are happening in Boson, I don't know if you can answer this question or not, but do you have a sense for like what products, what brands are sort of moving right now? What are people buying? What are people selling?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've got quite a lot of conversations ongoing, but luxury and fashion is once again really interested in this technology, being able to, and I think we're going to see, it was dipping the toe in the water last time. I think this is going to become a channel for luxury, a major kind of market for luxury and fashion, where, a lot of the people that, get rich from crypto and a lot of those players are interested in not only using crypto to access those markets, using Web3 technology to access those markets, but actually creating products specifically targeted for and kind of like Web3 native, products like digitals and all of these different things. So, I mean, that's a really hot area. Another hot area is the resurgence of crypto gaming. Boson developed a whole load of applications that would plug into like crypto games. So you could be playing a crypto game, you've got, kind of get to and go and buy a physical item, like, buying an NFT in game that's then redeemable for the physical in the real world, all completely seamlessly and natively Web3. Other things which maybe are a bit less sexy, but massive as well are, in Europe, we've got this regulation for digital product passports. So now, companies need to create these kind of like online archives of information about products, what they're made from, what's the supply chain, provenance, and pictures and all that. And so once you've done that effort, you've done 90% of the work to tokenize the thing. You've got all that data and stuff that you might do, and that you can just kind of, have that, wrapped within a Boson sort of token and list it on Boson, and then, you actually tokenize the assets as well. So, we're seeing that a lot of companies now, they've already overcome the hurdle in terms of effort to do a lot of the work. So they may as well sweat that asset.
I want to ask you a couple other questions, sort of get your perspective on things that I know listeners will be interested on. So the first one is, you're clearly a very intelligent person. You have this interesting background in physics, and you think in systems and ask a lot of interesting questions. Where do you see the Web3 industry presently in sort of this life cycle framing? Is it still emergent? Is it getting traction and the next jump is sort of into that mass adoption? Or are we still quite early and somewhere else?
I studied a lot of the work of a lady called Professor Carlota Perez, who's spent most of her career studying the life cycles of technology waves, like rail, steam, electricity, etc. And typically is normal for technologies to sort of go through a kind of wave where, initially there's this kind of big, bubble where loads of money gets put in because they see the huge possibilities of this technology, but it's too early. And so what happens is the technology fails to meet expectations and there's a crash. But all that money that gets put in early, not all of it is wasted. A lot of it goes to build the fundamental infrastructure that means later there can be a second sort of, uptick. And now that technology is mature enough that, they the canals are built or, the railroads are built where you can actually, come start running trains on them. And I think that's where we are. If you look at the internet, the kind of web, there were two big booms and two big busts. And since then, we've had, I don't know what it is, 20 or 25, 30 years worth of consistent growth since and adoption. And I think there's a high probability that this won't be a bull market, but this will be like, because, if you look back, and this is one of the things I sort of studied in like first masters, after those busts, everyone was waiting for the next bust and stuff. And, they were sort of waves, but there was never, it's just been consistent growth ever since and consistent adoption. So that's where I think we're at. But I also a strong believer in this kind of post-web thesis that Outlier Ventures and Jamie Burke, their founder, is putting out. And I'm actually a partner at Outlier Ventures now, and we were on their first accelerator and work quite closely with Jamie on his thesis development and ours. And basically what their thesis is that the next iteration of the web won't be like Web 4 or 5. It's going to be post-web, because the web is going to disappear. We're not going to have web interfaces. We're going to talk natural language, because that's just far easier and more natural than tapping at a keyboard or doing anything, right? We're able to do, we've got the technology now with AI that we can just talk, right? And say, oh, can you see, I'm looking for a holiday in, I don't know, Florida with my family. Can you check schedules and find flights and, come up natural. And then behind that natural language interface, instead of having like a platform, you will have these AI autonomous economic agents, right? That will go and search and find. So for example, and I'm one of the worst culprits, kind of confession. When I use Amazon, I had to find the nut, the bolt for one particular screw the other day for one of my monitor stands. So I went and paid $6.99 for 100 bolts and nuts, right? Now, I don't know if I've just paid 5 times the price that if I went to the hardware store for that same packet. It's just so convenient. I just click because, my monitor's hanging off and, and it's there. But these autonomous economic agents break all that. They can find you the best value because they work for you, right? It's kind of having all that convenience and various stuff, but with optimized economics. If you have AI, sort of an AI agents, those AI agents don't do business with like your local store or they need verifiable execution, right? Otherwise, they're not really smart, right? Because humans can kind of, defraud them. They need verifiable execution. So when they send their money, they're going to get the good. There's not any kind of like jiggery pokery. That is exactly what Boson and our new protocol, Fermion, do. Yeah, enable this kind of verifiable execution of economic requests to do commercial transactions with physical things.
And this other question I want to ask you is about what you've learned about business. So you've had a successful career. You've worked in startups. You've worked in growing established firms. And now, of course, you're working in Web3, launching Boson and a lot of projects, as you mentioned there. My question is, what's your advice to listeners who sort of fancy themselves as an entrepreneur or somebody that might be like you one day? What have you learned about business? Maybe the 1 or 2 lessons that you would say, hey, if you want to get started, make sure you sort of have these 1 or 2 things in place.
One of the things, it's a bit of a cliche. They're all kind of like people. Well, they're not all people. There'll be a couple of, some of them, most core things are people things. Firstly, get the best advice and make your own decisions. You cannot build a business listening to other people and just like doing what, something democratic. Oh, everybody put their hand up. What should we do? You can't build a business unless you get great advice and listen to. When I was on the first Outlier Basecamp, like kind of accelerator, I was surprised that a lot of the teams there that were less experienced than me in business were far less interested in hearing from these. I mean, because at the time we had Jamie Burke, Matt Law, we had Stefan, who's now the sort of CEO. These people are like some of the most knowledgeable in Web3 business on the planet. And I had direct contact with them, was really kind of greedy on their time. I'm good friends with them now. But, a lot of founders think they know. And no matter how much you know, you never know enough. And so, getting advice and surrounding yourself with people that know, but you've got to make your own decision, right? Because, so that I think is a really big one. You've got to have an understanding both of that to build things and do great things, you've got to assemble a team of amazing people. To do that, you've got to be both look after people and be pretty harsh if people are in. When you're doing startups and stuff, you're not running like a sandwich shop. You're trying literally sometimes to, send rockets to the moon, and you need the best people. And when you get them, you really look after them. And if not, you're still kind of, respectful, but there's no room for the sort of passengers. And then I think also is being adaptive and understanding these different trends and riding them, rather than just having a fixed view. I mean, we've evolved over this bear market. We've evolved massively at Boson. One of them is like not talking technology to really deeply understanding our markets and, getting like advisors in luxury and some of them, really highly networked and knowledgeable people to help introduce us to the right customers and inform the kind of language and positioning we should have. And I mean, the other classic one is do something you love. It is so much time and such long hours that if you don't love it, you're not going to be obsessed by it. And if you're not obsessed by it, you will not be able to force yourself to spend the time on something that you're not obsessed with.
What sort of trends or storylines are you tracking as we see the broader Web3 industry evolve? I know you're working on something very important related to e-commerce and very innovative approach to that. But if you zoom out a little bit, what storylines, narratives, milestones are you sort of watching for as signal that this thing is growing and getting adopted?
Well, I mean, a big one for this next year is this kind of the tokenization of real world assets. It's going to be massive. It's core to the thesis for a computable economy that in order to enable computable economy, you've got to bring all assets on chain so they can be referenced and, bringing all data into the computer so that it can be kind of called. So that is a massive trend. And when you've got people like Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock, saying, all assets will be tokenized, that is a very big signal on that's the case. However, I'm very much, steeped in the kind of decentralized ethos, but I encourage the likes of BlackRock and all these big banks to come in, and because, adoption, it's like all of these waves of adoption. I had all of the big newspapers getting involved in the web, all the big travel agents. Eventually they got disrupted by that tech and none of them are around anymore, right? A lot of them. Blockchain technology is so powerful in its ability to disintermediate, especially those intermediaries that are taking massive control and excessive extraction. So I encourage them to come and use the technology and stuff. It's great, right? But we need to remember that, blockchain is about preventing excessive extraction, enabling, an economy where everyone gets to share in the value they create. And then also just fundamentally, the reason we use blockchain is to give us, so that when we have a blockchain asset, we have this far stronger level of commitment. Like if you've got a Bitcoin in your wallet, it's different to even having money in the bank, right? If you remember what happened to in the the big financial crash where people like the Cypriots woke up to find out half their money had been taken by the bank. Right? That doesn't happen with blockchains. So, I think real world assets is a massive trend, but what we're going to see is, I think it starts with lots of decentralized companies, but once things are on chain, people are like, okay, well, I can have this asset on chain without paying all these massive fees. And, the disruption then comes. And what I'm doing with Boson and Fermion. So Fermion is a second protocol. It's separate network, separate token, but works in tandem with Boson to add additional verification of high value assets. So you might send commerce assets like a pair of sneakers or whatever through the post. And that, like you do with Amazon, you do the same with Boson, but you wouldn't send a gold bar or the Mona Lisa, or, you need a higher level of verification and custody for these assets. And that's what Fermion does. But also with these high value assets, you might want to fractionalize them. So it also enables things like fractionalizations and stuff like that. What we're building is basically the decentralized infrastructure to enable the decentralized sort of tokenization, what we call like the hard tokenization. By hard tokenization, we mean if you hold that token, you've got a strong commitment that either you're going to get the asset or your money back. You don't need to trust it. We're building that infrastructure. We encourage all of this centralized blockchain infrastructure, but it's not that much different. If you've got some gold bars held by a central bank and they give you a piece of paper to say you've got, these gold bars, it's not that much different if that central, or like a large, merchant bank. It's not that much different that they give you a piece of paper versus they give you a blockchain token. If you're still relying on them to honor the paper or the token, the trust assumptions are the same. But in property hard tokenized, so if you think SBF, had he been offering some sort of, we're tokenizing real world assets, so I've got, a whole load of gold bars here, and I'm going to give you some tokens. I mean, what's the value of those, right? If you're trusting him to honor. Hard tokenization is where you don't have that trust. It's like having Bitcoin in your wallet. There are, strong and verifiable guarantees that you will either get the asset or your money. And I think that is the game changer. And that's also what enables this thing called a computable economy.
Well, Justin, now we've reached a point in the podcast where I'm going to ask you the GRTiQ 10. These are 10 questions I ask each guest of the podcast every week. Gives us a chance to get to know you a little bit better. But as I always say, I hope it inspires listeners to learn something new, try something different, or achieve more in their own life. And so, are you ready for the GRTiQ 10?
Let's do it.
The GRTiQ 10. This is the way.
10 questions for astronauts floating in space.
What book or article has had the most impact on your life?
A book called Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, a German author. And it's actually a story about the life. I'm not very religious or anything like that, but it's a story about the life of Buddha as he goes through his different stages. And at one stage, he kind of is, drinking a lot and, with sort of courtesans and stuff, and he's very wayward. And then another one, and just all the phases of his life. And he just ends up sort of there at the end, just sitting there by the river, just listening to the sound of the river, reflecting on all of this. I think it's just a wonderful, it's a book I've given many times to friends when they've been in really bad or dark places, to kind of broaden their perspective that everyone has ups and downs and life is a journey. That's an amazing book.
Is there a movie or a TV show that you would recommend everybody's got to watch?
I wouldn't say I've necessarily got one. I mean, I love sci-fi, so 2001: A Space Odyssey, I would think one of my favorites.
If you could only listen to one music album for the rest of your life, which one would you choose?
Probably be Pink Floyd, Echoes.
What's the best advice someone's ever given to you?
Be yourself.
What's one thing you've learned in your life that you suspect most other people haven't learned or know quite yet?
The edges of physics and knowledge and the things that we definitely know, there are some things that are completely contradictory and contradict the whole, like reality doesn't make sense. It's not that we don't understand it. It's that there are paradoxes that just simply don't make sense, i.e. this whole thing doesn't add up in a very fundamental way. And for me, potentially that points to a simulation or some sort of end of the programming where you get to the end and, that's a glitch, that doesn't work.
What's the best life hack you've discovered for yourself?
Well, I don't know if it's a life hack, but you need to get to the stage where you trust yourself. If you say you're going to do something tomorrow, you'll do it. And therefore you can relax today. You don't need to be stressed because you've got a system for managing, mounting of to-dos. You've got the confidence that step by step you'll do it. And then you can just be relaxed and, climb the mountain.
And Justin, based on your own life experiences and observations, what's the one habit or characteristic that you think best explains how people find success in life?
Well, I think this goes back to, there's this kind of thing in, I think it's probably economics or something, where if you were a blind man wandering a landscape, how would you find the highest peak? And what's it called? Like the local maximization problem or something, right? And one person could say, why don't I just walk wherever? I'll just walk uphill and I'll find the highest peak. But you could just find a small hill and there could be a mountain next to you. So you need to do a combination of locally maximizing plus doing jumps, right? And so this is kind of like the mathematical solution to optimizing this problem, which is kind of a proxy for success. So you need to work on, wherever you've got, whether if you're working in it, if you're working for a company and, sure, you want to work hard, try and get promoted, but that might end up being for me working where I worked before Project Bars was like a local maximum. And then I just did this random hop, right? Which I jumped into a complete wasteland. I was, nowhere. But then I found a much bigger maximum.
And then the final three questions are complete the sentence type questions. So the first one is, the thing that most excites me about the future of Web3 is?
A completely new economic order, computable economy.
And how about this one? If you're on X or Twitter, whatever people decide to call it, then you should be following.
Well, I don't know. Maybe Elon Musk or someone.
And then finally, Justin, complete the sentence. I'm happiest when?
I'm spending time with my daughter.
The GRTiQ 10.
And I show you how things
Justin, this was a thrill to meet you. A lot of great ideas shared today and deep insights on some themes that are super important, not only to the things you're working on at Boson, but for the industry as a whole. Thanks for taking the time. If listeners want to stay in touch with you, follow the things that you're working on, what's the best way for them to stay in touch?
Well, they can follow me on Twitter at Justin Banon.
This has been a production of the GRTiQ podcast. For more information, including detailed show notes, visit grtiq.com/podcast. That's grtiq.com/podcast.
Please consider contributing to this project and helping build the community by subscribing and leaving a review.
GRTiQ
Podcast.